Earl Campbell didn't have any moves. He had one move: go look for somebody to run over.
That's how legends describe the most violent runner ever. Now at 71, Earl Campbell can barely walk, hooked on painkillers for years, with screws grinding into his spine. NFL legends are finally exposing what the game really did to him. Let's get into it. The human wrecking ball and the time bomb in his spine. The man in that footage is Earl Campbell, and to understand why so many people held their breath, you have to understand who he used to be, because the gap between the two is one of the most staggering and quietly heartbreaking stories in the entire history of professional football. This is a man who was once so physically dominant that grown professional athletes, men paid to hit people for a living, openly admitted they were afraid of him. Today, he is 71 years old, and he mostly gets around with the help of an electric scooter, a golf cart for longer distances, balance that betrays him, and a body that he himself says was asked to do things it was never built to survive. But before we get to the scooter, the surgeries, the pills, and the rumors, we have to rewind. Because the saddest part of Earl Campbell's story isn't where it ended up. It's that the warning signs were screaming the entire time, and almost nobody was listening, including him. Let's start with the basics. Earl Christian Campbell was born on March 29, 1955, in Tyler, Texas, which is exactly where the nickname comes from, the Tyler Rose. He grew up in genuine grinding poverty, the sixth of 11 children, and when his father, a World War II veteran who worked the rose fields by day and a second job at night, died of a heart attack, Earl was only 11 years old. His mother raised 11 kids alone, working as a maid, and she begged him not to play football because she was afraid of what the game might do to her son. Sit with that for a moment. The mother knew. She was scared before he ever took a snap. And he played anyway, because he loved it, and because at 5'11" and well over 200 pounds, he was simply built for collision. He won the Heisman Trophy at the University of Texas, the first Longhorn ever to do it. Then he became the #1 overall pick of the Houston Oilers in 1978, and what happened next was not normal football. It was something closer to a force of nature. Here's the thing about Earl Campbell that the highlight reels can't fully capture. He did not run away from people. He ran at them. His entire philosophy was to lower his head and detonate. They called him a battering ram, a sledgehammer, a human wrecking ball, and the names were not exaggerations. Ask the men who played with him. Kenny Stabler, the legendary Raiders and Oilers quarterback, used to hand Earl the ball over and over in the closing minutes of games, and he described the man's running style with a kind of bewildered awe.
Earl Campbell didn't have any moves. He had one move.
One move, that was it. No jukes, no spins, no dancing in the backfield to make a defender miss. Stabler finished the thought with the part that defined an entire career.
Go look for somebody to run over.
That was the job description. In Stabler's own words, go find a human being and run him over. And he did it again and again and again, more than 300 times a season for 4 straight years. But here's the cruel mathematics of that style. When you hit people that hard, you also absorb everything you dish out. Every collision is a transaction, and the body keeps the receipts. You can hear what it looked like from the broadcast booth. This is the call of a famous hit Campbell took from Steelers safety Donnie Shell.
Campbell got the first down, got whacked but good, and he is still down on the ground.
Still down on the ground. The announcers couldn't quite believe what they'd seen, and they spelled out exactly what had happened to him.
He literally buried his helmet in Campbell's midsection.
That was a Tuesday for Earl Campbell. That was the cost of doing business, and the people who watched him closely could already see the ending coming, even at the height of his glory. Hall of Fame running back Franco Harris of the Steelers issued a warning while Campbell was still in his prime, saying that knocking people over looks great, but you can't do it forever. Other backs said the same thing. Ron Johnson, whose own career was cut short by injuries, looked at Campbell's reckless abandon and said flatly that you can't do that for 10 years and hope to survive. Even Tony Dorsett, a tough runner in his own right, reportedly shuddered at the idea of running the way Earl did. So why didn't anyone stop it? Because his coach, the beloved Bum Phillips, didn't want it stopped. Phillips defended the style openly and proudly, saying he was not going to change a thing about how Earl played, and Campbell, for his part, never blamed him. Years later, after Phillips passed away, Earl pushed back on the whole narrative, insisting that the volume of carries wasn't hard to carry. I just only ran, and giving all the credit to his offensive line. To this day, he speaks of Phillips like a father. But here's where the story stops being about football toughness and becomes something genuinely frightening, because there was a second hidden problem that nobody on that Oilers sideline knew about. A ticking clock buried in Earl Campbell's own anatomy. He had been born with a condition called congenital spinal stenosis, a narrowing of the spinal canal that puts constant pressure on the nerves running through it. He played his entire life with it. High school, college, 8 NFL seasons, and it was completely undiagnosed. Think about what that means in combination with his running style. A man with a dangerously narrow spinal canal, deliberately lowering his head and driving the crown crown of his helmet into other human beings, 300 plus times a year. Doctors would later look at that and call it almost suicidal. One of them told Campbell, point blank, that he probably should never have played football at all because every single carry carried a real risk of permanent paralysis. And on one November afternoon in 1979, that clock nearly went off. The Oilers were playing the Oakland Raiders, and on the field that day was a safety, so feared they called him the assassin, Jack Tatum. When you ask Earl Campbell to name the toughest defenders he ever faced, the answer comes fast.
I would say Joe Green, a guy by the name of Jack Tatum.
On a goal line carry, Tatum found a lane and arrived at full speed, driving the crown of his helmet up under Campbell's chin and snapping his head back like a man rear-ended by a truck. Campbell somehow stayed on his feet, fell into the end zone, and scored. Tatum was left dazed on the turf, and what almost no one knew is what Earl felt in that instant. He described it years later in haunting terms. A shock went down to the heels on my feet, and it burned. And standing in that end zone, a single thought went through his mind. Something's wrong. He told no one, no doctor, no trainer, no teammate. He finished the game with 32 carries. He played on. And what he didn't know, what nobody knew, was that on a spine as narrow as his, that hit was very likely a spinal cord contusion, a bruise on the cord itself. The kind of moment that today would have ended his day on the spot and sent him straight into an MRI tube. He had just stared down paralysis, scored a touchdown on top of it, and gone back to the huddle. The bill for that day would not arrive for 20 more years, but when it did, it would nearly take everything. The bill comes due, surgeries, pills, and the lowest point. Earl Campbell walked away from football in his own way, on his own terms. He had decided as a young man at the University of Texas that he would only play 7 years and then disappear, and he very nearly held to it, retiring after the 1985 season at the age of 30.
I knew when I left UT I only wanted to play football 7 years.
For a while, life was good. He built a successful company, Earl Campbell Meat Products, producing smoked sausage and barbecue sauce. He had financial security. He had his family. From the outside, this looked like the perfect landing. The legend who got out clean. But the clock in his spine was still ticking, and the bill was about to come due. Not all at once, but in waves, each one larger than the last. The first wave was psychological, and it caught everyone off guard. Around 1988, the man his own coach had once called Superman started experiencing terrifying episodes. Sudden cold sweats, his whole body shaking, his heart pounding like it was trying to escape his chest. He was so convinced he was having a heart attack. Campbell men and his family had died young of cardiac problems, that he was hospitalized for 7 days, certain his heart was failing. Every test came back normal. The real diagnosis, when it finally came, was panic and anxiety disorder. He would later write an entire book about it, describing the experience as a nameless terror of the soul, like living in a haunted house. The fearless man who once carried defenders into the end zone was now, at times, locking himself inside with the drapes drawn, hiding behind sunglasses, unable to face the world. Then the second wave hit, and it was physical, and it was the big one. In 1999, after years of escalating back pain he had always assumed was just normal football wear and tear, a spinal surgeon ran the test that finally revealed the truth, the congenital stenosis he'd carried his whole life. And the doctor's reaction was not relief at solving a mystery. It was something closer to disbelief that the man was still walking at all. The miracle, the doctor said, was not Campbell's Heisman or his MVP. The miracle was that he had played that entire career and was never paralyzed. To understand the full weight of that word paralyzed, you only have to look at what the same brutal era and the very same safety had already done to another man. Roughly a year before that goal line hit on Campbell, Jack Tatum collided with New England Patriots receiver Darryl Stingley on a routine pass over the middle. The hit was ruled completely clean under the rules of 1978. It also fractured Stingley's neck and left him a quadriplegic for the rest of his life. His career finished at 26, his body confined to a wheelchair until his death decades later. That was the razor's edge Earl Campbell had been dancing on 300 times a season, on a spinal canal far narrower and more fragile than almost anyone else's. When his doctors used the word miracle, that Darryl Stingley's wheelchair was the alternate ending they were quietly picturing for him. That diagnosis kicked off nearly a decade of surgery, 5 back operations between roughly 1999 and 2008, both knees replaced. Surgeons drove metal rods and a total of 12 screws into his vertebrae trying to stabilize a spine that had been quietly failing for 50 years, but the hardware didn't hold. Over time, the screws worked loose, and loose screws inside a spinal canal do something almost too awful to imagine. They begin poking and grinding directly directly into the nerves. Every single movement Earl made fired pain through his entire body because the metal was constantly chewing at the nerves it was supposed to protect. By 2007, the decline was visible to anyone who saw him. Reporting from that era described a man bent at nearly a 45-degree angle, unable to straighten his back or his knees, and so limited that it could take him roughly 6 minutes to cover 40 yards with a walker. 40 yards, the same distance this man once covered in under 5 seconds, in full pads, with a defense trying to kill him. Now it was 6 minutes, with a walker, sweating and shuffling down a hallway. The arthritis in his hands was so bad he could barely close a fist by his mid-40s. He used a cane for short distances and a wheelchair for anything longer. And then came the third wave, the one that nearly killed him. When you are in that much pain every single day for years, the doctors reached for the prescription pad, and they kept reaching. Campbell, who had no history of drug use, started on milder medication and escalated to OxyContin. The pain never let up, so he took more and more. Before long, he was taking up to 10 OxyContin pills a day, and he was washing them down with beer. His son Christian later described his father during this period as a blank canvas with paint splattered all over it, disorganized, fading, slipping away inside his own house. The most physically powerful man anyone had ever seen was now confined to a wheelchair and quietly drowning. And the cruelest part was how the pieces fed on one another. The chronic pain could mimic the very panic attacks that had stalked him since the late 80s. The racing heart, the tightness in the chest, the sense of doom, so that body and mind took turns tightening the screws. The pills quieted the pain for an hour and made the whole picture worse over the long run. It was a closed loop, and from the inside of it, there was no obvious door-marked exit. Earl himself has told this part of the story, and it's worth hearing him say it. He describes how the injuries piled up after football, how the doctor visits stacked one on top of another, and how he started self-medicating to cope.
I got involved in these injuries, and I had to go see this doctor. I had to go see this doctor.
It started small, the way these things always do. A drink to take the edge off at the end of a long, painful day.
So I decided to drink a little Budweiser every now and then.
A little Budweiser every night, then a shot of tequila, then the pills on top of all of it. And it kept getting worse until it reached a point that a doctor reportedly called his son to deliver a warning no child ever wants to hear, that without an intervention, his father could die soon. It all came to a head inside the family's own home, in a scene Earl now tells with the kind of clarity that only comes from having lived through your own rock bottom. His son sat him down. They made him take a chair. And then his boys, the upstanding young men he had raised, had to say the thing out loud.
Hey, Dad, you drinking all that beer and that tequila and you taking pain pills? You know better than that.
His first instinct was the instinct of a proud man cornered in his own house. He bristled. And then his sons delivered the ultimatum that would save his life.
You're gonna go to rehab. You're gonna get your stuff straight.
Meanwhile, the physical crisis had reached its own breaking point. By 2008, at the urging of Bum Phillips, Campbell finally landed in the operating room of a Houston spinal surgeon named Dr. Stan Jones. He arrived in a wheelchair, unable to walk in so much agony that he reportedly showed up at the hospital a full week early. And what Dr. Jones found when he opened him up is the single most disturbing detail in this entire story. As Campbell lay unconscious on the table, every time Jones tried to remove one of those loose screws, Campbell's massive legs would involuntarily jump, because the metal was so directly embedded in the nerves that merely touching it sent his body firing on its own. The surgeon said those screws were much more mobile than I have ever seen, and that there was very good reason for Earl to have been so miserable for so long. So picture the full scope of where this man was, near the end of the 2000s, bent in half, wheelchair-bound hands that wouldn't close, screws grinding his nerves so badly his legs jumped on an operating table, hooked on 10 painkillers a day and beer, battling a panic disorder that turned his own mind into a haunted house. The human wrecking ball had been wrecked, and his sons had just told him he was going to rehab. The question was whether the man who had never backed down from a hit on the field could finally take the hardest hit of his life, the one in the mirror. He got up Sobriety, family, and the truth about life at 71. So Earl Campbell went to rehab, and the way he tells it, he went in expecting to do the bare minimum and leave. He didn't even have to leave Austin. He checked into a facility in the south part of the city. He went in reluctant, half convinced. This was something being done to him rather than for him. The standard program ran 28 days. Earl stayed 44. Alone in that place, the man knelt down and finally, fully admitted he had a problem. He went through the shaking and the cold sweats of withdrawal, and he came out the other side sober, leaning on Alcoholics Anonymous, on prayer, and most of all on the people who'd refused to let him disappear. There was a single moment inside that rehab that Earl points to as the one that flipped everything from punishment into purpose. His son Tyler came to visit, and in the middle of the small talk, Tyler said something that landed like a prophecy.
You think you can help some people? Wait till you get out of here.
He was right. That one sentence quietly reframed the worst thing that ever happened to Earl Campbell as the credential for the best work he would ever do. He has since described doctors in the context of how freely those pills were handed out as some of the greatest drug pushers in the world, not out of bitterness, but as a warning, because he now treats it as his job to make sure other people don't walk the same road he did. When you ask him today what matters most, the football trophies don't come up. The family does.
The most important people to me was Miss Campbell and those two boys. And they treated me just the same, and they encouraged me.
That's the turn in the whole story. The intervention that felt like a betrayal in the moment turned out to be the greatest act of love anyone ever did for him. And here's the detail that should reframe how you think about this entire video. That dramatic clip from March of 2026, the one that made everyone panic. Earl Campbell himself shut it down. Amid the swirl of online rumors that he'd been hospitalized or was at death's door, he went on his own verified Facebook account and told people plainly not to believe it, that he was doing just fine, that he had not been hospitalized, that his health was good, and then he did what he always does. He showed up in public anyway, appearing at the Earl Campbell Tyler Rose Award banquet to prove it in person. Because the truth about Earl Campbell at 71 is not the truth the thumbnail wants to sell you. Yes, his body carries the bill for everything he did on that field. Yes, he relies on a scooter and a golf cart and assistance to get around, and his balance, as he freely admits, was never the same after all those surgeries. But sad is the wrong word, and he is the first one to tell you so. Listen to how he describes his health now, after that final surgery and after getting sober. There's no self-pity in it.
Things are a lot better than it used to be.
He's honest about what's gone. The golf game he can't play the way he wants to anymore, but he frames the whole thing with gratitude rather than grief.
I have a back problem and had 2 knee replacements, but things are great.
And on the addiction itself, he reached a place of genuine peace. By his own account, in his later years, he is largely pain-free and living without the pills and the alcohol, having learned, in his words, how to live his life without any of it. He has now been sober for over 15 years. And he didn't just save himself. He turned the worst chapter of his life into a mission. He travels to events like a gathering he calls the Sober Bowl, raising money to help strangers fighting the same battle he fought, often leaving every dollar raised in the community where it was raised. The man who once ran people over now spends his time picking people up. The motto at that event is simple and almost defiantly selfless. Whatever money they raise in a city, they leave in that city, funneling it through people on the ground. A pastor here, a community leader there, someone like the former quarterback Randall Cunningham in his church, so it reaches a person who's struggling and can't afford the help on their own. Earl would rather spend a Super Bowl weekend doing that than sitting in the stands. Ask him what's new in his world these days, and the answer tells you everything about how he's chosen to define this final act.
My number one priority every day is trying to stay sober and be a good guy.
And the simple verdict on how that mission is going.
Things will work out pretty good for me.
His days now are full in the ways that count. He lives in the Austin area surrounded by a growing crowd of grandchildren.
I live in Austin and got all these grandkids.
He keeps a hand in the family meat business, though he'll happily tell you the day-to-day now belongs to his son Tyler, the same son who carries his own heavy load, living with multiple sclerosis while working alongside his father. Earl stays involved with University of Texas athletics. He travels to Canton for Hall of Fame activities, and he presides over the annual award that bears his name, the Earl Campbell Tyler Rose Award, honoring the best of college football's offensive players. The wisdom he passes to those young winners is the same wisdom his old coach once tried to drill into a 20-something who didn't want to hear it, that the game would not last forever, but a life of giving back could.
Football is gonna outlast you guys.
He understands it now, and he carries the lesson his mother gave him, the one about kindness costing nothing, that signing an autograph for a fan is easy because it doesn't take much to be nasty, and being nasty is the harder, heavier way to live.
Sign that autograph for those people because it don't take a lot to be nasty to people.
Which brings us, finally, to the question that haunts every story like this one. Knowing the price, the wheelchair, the surgeries, the screws in the nerves, the addiction, the panic, the body that betrayed him in his 50s and 60s, would he do it all again? Would he take it back? Run out of bounds, save himself, protect that spine? A reporter put almost exactly that question to him back in 2004 when he was 48 years old, already shuffling with a cane and already paying dearly. And Earl Campbell's answer is the truest thing in this entire story. He didn't hesitate. He said no, because if he had run any other way, then you wouldn't have Earl sitting here. You would have had somebody else. He believes everything in life has a price, and he decided long ago that this was the cost of being exactly who he was meant to be. That is not the philosophy of a sad man. That is the philosophy of a man who got hit harder than almost anyone who ever played the game, who had a time bomb in his own spine the entire time, who lost his body and very nearly lost his mind in his life, and who got up anyway, every single time.
Life is good and I really enjoy enjoy the challenge.
So the next time one of those sensational thumbnails tries to sell you the tragedy of Earl Campbell at 71, remember what the man himself keeps telling anyone who'll listen. The body is broken, the spirit never was, and the Tyler Rose, against every medical odd ever stacked against him, is still here, still giving, still grateful, and still, in his own words, doing just fine. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed watching this video, click on one of the boxes playing on your screen to watch more similar content.